Hey there. Before we start this episode, I wanted to jump into your ears straight away and let you know how you can support us best with this podcast so we can keep this going. So, the most important thing that when you have listened to this episode would be share, share, share. Spread the word, drop our name, drop us in the conversation. If you see a question popping up somewhere, say, the Damn Parenting Ladies, they have an episode on this. Pop the episodes out, get us into the conversation of the communities. This is the best way to support Eva and me. And give us a like on Spotify, give us a follow, jump over to Instagram, Damn Parenting Podcast. Make sure that you spread the word about what you like, why you like the episodes, and that you spread the knowledge that we are putting out there so it can be heard and received by everyone who needs to hear this. And this is what I just wanted to drop with you before now you can enjoy them chat or an expert episode. So let's see what's going to be on. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Damn Parenting, your English-speaking parenting podcast from Amsterdam. And we are your hosts, Maren and
Eva.
And today we have Helen with us. Hi, Helen.
Hey, guys.
Hi.
And we met Helen actually at our first in-person event when we did the big step from behind the screen into the real world. And we had the book party for Simone Davis's Montessori child book. And Helen bumped into us and said, "Oh, you are the podcast ladies?" We said, "Yes, we are the podcast ladies." And then we just started a natural conversation with her and we were sharing what topics are on the plate. And we casually asked you, well, we're also looking always for birth stories. And you took that bait, I might say, and said, "I'm here to share." Today, Helen is here to share her birth story with us. We were discussing a little earlier because Helen has 2 children, which one to pick. And as we have already had a couple birth stories that kind of had an overall topic with them, we thought this could be the first birth story that we're covering where we will focus on the second birth, because there's a lot of ideas and things around a second birth that are out there. One of them, I'm just going to throw it out, like, oh, the second birth is going to be always faster. It's like your body already knows it. So all these things. So we wanted to bring Helen to the table to discuss if this was true for her, how her pregnancy went, and just hearing from a second time mom how the whole process the second time around was. So jumping straight back in, Helen, can you give us a little bit of background about your second pregnancy, how that all went?
Yeah, would love to. And I just have to say how much I love what you guys are doing. So thank you for all the expat parents that you are here doing what you do.
Couldn't do it without you. So we always need people like you reaching out to us, sharing their story and just engaging in the conversation.
Well, yeah, I would love to get into this one because, as you said, I had a bit of an expectation that my second pregnancy and birth would probably be just like the first, and it wasn't. And I just had quite a lot that I had to kind of work through during both. And I think it's helpful to share that because some people do have an experience where the first pregnancy and the second are really similar and the birth is the same. And that's cool. And I hope for people that can be the case. But yeah, for me, it was really different. And just being a second time mom and like trying to get my head around how I was going to parent 2 little ones and also like how I was going to be able to love the second as much as the first, these are all these things that just, I think we all probably think about, but like hit you when you realize you're pregnant for the second time. And so I definitely kind of carried that question through my pregnancy. And I'm also the eldest of 2. And I just think your own experience plays into parenting so much, right? So I was so like terrified that my son, because I have a son and a daughter and my son's the oldest, that my son just would feel like as much love as I hope that, he was feeling once my daughter was born. So all these things were kind of going through my head when I found out I was pregnant.
How far are they apart? What's the age difference between your children?
So there's 2 years and 7 months. And yeah, we were definitely planning to have a second, but just not quite as soon as we ended up having her. And, she's a total gift. I think I was saying to you before that she's taught us all a lot that we needed to learn earlier. So I'm just so grateful that she came when she did, and that was her time. She's a real little force in the world. But yeah, I had a lot to get my head around because I wasn't expecting to be pregnant again so soon. So I, fell pregnant like just before Max turned 2, still breastfeeding him. So I quickly decided to stop doing that because I wasn't feeling well straight away. So, there were things that had to happen that I wasn't planning for quite when they happened.
So as it was a surprise for you, can I ask, did you actually go and talk to anyone about this since it was so playing so heavily on your mind and it was so quick?
Yeah. So, and, this is like a really important topic, I think, that doesn't get discussed enough. So I was due to go to the doctor about something else. Like, I can't remember what it was. And in the end, I had a telephone consultation with the doctor and was like, we don't need to talk about that anymore. I'm pregnant. And the doctor said, oh, how are you? Like, how are you about that? And it was such an important moment and question for me in the process right at the beginning of the pregnancy. And I just burst into tears and I was like, I'm not doing so well. And we just talked, about it. Like, she reminded me that you have a choice, and just being given the options, right? Just being someone saying to me who was neutral in my life, like, you have some options, reminded me that I had a level of, I had the choice. And it also reminded me that there was no question I wanted to have this baby. But yeah, it's been such an important moment in my life, actually, that conversation. I think it gave me a sense of like control that I actually didn't feel like I had before that moment. And I was just in that place of like that spin, like I'm someone that likes a plan and this wasn't in my plan right now. And it happened, it happens to a lot of people. So it was really important to me that someone could say to me, you have a choice. And then I could kind of get my head around things a little better. And I was just panicking, I was just frightened, and like frightened for my older son, frightened for my relationship, like frightened for my job. I was just starting to get into more work, given that Max was about to turn 2. And I think a lot of parents feel like they get to 2 and they're like, okay, I can get a bit more of me back. So I think there's a lot of fear. Like, I know a lot of people be like, oh, you've got your daughter's in the world. She might hear this one day. And I feel really strongly that I will have this conversation with her because she's a total joy. I mean, her middle name is Joy. I'm so grateful because I learned all this stuff because of this experience I went through because I was pregnant with her. So it doesn't take anything away from my love for her. It was just real and really hard. So yeah, that was the start.
I mean, it's amazing how just 2 questions like, how are you?
Yeah.
And, you always have options. I mean, 2 simple sentences can actually make an impact for you.
Exactly. And I'm just so grateful for the doctor that we still the same doctor, because I feel like she has been on this journey with me. And actually, since my pregnancy, I haven't kind of got back to myself, like physically or emotionally, I think, as I did with Max, with my first. So been to the doctors a little bit more regularly, and I felt so cared for that I could say to her, well, you know what it was like for me at the beginning, and now I'm here. Yeah, I felt very supported actually by the system here.
I have a feeling that we're going to get a lot of people asking who's your doctor because they're going to swap to yours, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's such a nice thing that she did. Like, really, I feel like she could, I mean, she obviously knew you and your story, but it feels like she really she felt like she needed to ask this question and give you that space to really explore it, and also give you the chance to really consciously and verbally say, yes, I'm making this choice now, because it sounds to me like your pregnancy, you were like kind of, all right, yeah, a second one down the line, but then it wasn't down, like you were trying and really like, we want to be pregnant like this second. So it sounds to me like it happened. So it wasn't really this conscious decision and choice, we're going to try it and now we're going to do it. But then it was kind of like, okay, now you have the choice. Now you get really sit back again and be like, do I want this? Yes or no? What are my options? And it sounds to me like that really has helped you then asking yourself that question. And that was really empathetic of that doctor, I have to say, given the other experiences we've heard and had ourselves with the doctor system here. So that is really healing to hear that there are doctors out there who really sense this and know what questions to ask.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because she could very easily have just, closed the call because she didn't, we weren't going to have the conversations that she was expecting for us to have. So very like careful, caring of her. And I have to say, like, that I feel like this doctor's practice do look after people's emotional health as much as they do their physical health. So, and I was actually recommended this doctor. So yeah, but they obviously, people know that they're great.
If we move on now, can we ask then about your birthing plan? Because obviously this is your second child. So what was your idea for how this was going to go?
Yeah, so I was very fortunate to be able to have my son at home. I'm English. I fell pregnant in the UK before we moved to the Netherlands. And I was at that point pretty terrified about birth, as I feel we're all told to be. We're shown to be petrified of it in the media and everywhere. And when we moved to the Netherlands, it was an opportunity for me to kind of start learning everything there was to know about birth. And that's kind of my process. I have to just get in there and really like understand things in detail. So I did that with pregnancy and birth. And so by the time I gave birth to my son, I had decided that the home birth was the right option for me. And it was a bit of a flip reverse it, because I do not think I would have done that in the UK, and because of the experiences of my friends and family in the UK. But yeah, I had some space from that, being in the Netherlands, to sort of make, again, my own choice in this one. And so because I'd had a positive experience with my first birth, I mean, I did every class there was to do. Like I did a hypnobirthing class, and I had a doula, Patricia Friends, who's like just a superhero. And I'd recommend a doula to anyone who's considering it. I'd recommend her to anybody who's considering a doula. You should get her on the podcast, by the way. She's just a phenomenal woman, Dutch doula. And so I also did an antenatal class that was like for expats. And Patricia the doula, also did like partner classes, and she does classes for women, like for birth positions. So like did a ton of stuff first time around. And so when I fell pregnant again, I thought, right, well, I'm just going to follow exactly the same process. I probably won't do as much of the classes. And my partner was like, do I have to do all this again? But so I did some of it, but not all of it again. But Patricia was like, has been a important theme and person in my life and the births of both my children. And she's still a big part of like my life now. She's a really close friend. Did like a one-off hypnobirthing session with a lady called Miranda, who runs a hypnobirthing organization she's based in Amstelveen. She's English. So we did like a one-off reminder. And then what else did I do? Yeah, then spent quite a bit of time with Patricia. But what was interesting for me about the second pregnancy was a lot of what I needed to kind of work on, if you want to call it that, was my emotional health, because it had been a shock being pregnant, and I needed to kind of get my head around what I was going to do work-wise. And yeah, with my son, him having a sister and what that was going to mean for us as a family. And there was a lot for me that I needed to process. And so I did a lot of that work with my doula, Patricia. I think that's what for me is so misunderstood about a doula. So she was with me through both pregnancies early on, so we could tackle things together that were coming up for me that might be about birth, or there might be physical symptoms, but they might also be emotional things. And for me, birth is such an emotional process and such a huge life event for women, that the emotional part of it is often missed.
Did you I obviously assumed that you made a plan to actually give birth at home then again?
Yes, sorry, I'm not actually answering your question. I'm just really passionate about.
No worries. I mean, this is what we want to hear. The truth.
Was there any big difference in your birthing plan for the second birth than the first one? Was there anything where you knew, oh, okay, I had this in mind, but actually I know I got to know myself better, because I mean, from my own process, I had all this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. But then when I was birthing, I was like, I don't want to hear any of this music. I don't want to hear, like, I was like completely learning what I needed then. Was there anything where you said, oh, I learned from the first time around that this is actually not working? Or surprisingly, I would have never thought that was going to be the good thing that I want to repeat.
Yeah, so totally with you on the music. Like with my first, I'd created this like massive long playlist. None of it I actually wanted to listen to. And I just wanted silence when I was giving birth first time. So that was that for me. Yeah, that kind of thing. I simplified it a lot. So, I mean, the plan, like the first, was to if we could be at home, stay at home the whole time, that's what we'd do. If we couldn't, fine. And I think the big thing that I became more confident in was asking the midwives to kind of leave me alone a bit, which is obviously something that is easier to do if you've got a doula as well. So for me, Patricia was kind of by my side the whole time alongside my partner. And so the midwife kind of was getting in the way. And the first time I had been encouraged to just tell them, you know, if you feel like they're asking too many questions or they're just kind of in your space, just, you know, tell them not to be. But I'm really hook, line and sinker, an English polite person, and the Dutch are helpfully beating that out of me. And so second time I was like, can you give me some space? You know, I advocated for myself better, I think. And also things like being asked if, you know, because they should ask you if they can check your dilation, and you don't have to say yes. For me, like, I'm not interested in the numbers. Like, it's going to take the time it's going to take. I don't need to know how many centimeters I am. And I knew that kind of thing would put me off, right? It would discourage me at a point in the process if they told me I was some really low number. And I would just have that in my head and it would get me off course. So yeah, second time I was quite clear that I didn't want to know. And even if they did feel like they needed to check me, like, don't tell me. So that maybe is one of the biggest differences. But I mean, otherwise, I think the plan was going to be the same. And because Patricia knew how my birth experience had gone the first time, you know, she was also able to advocate for me that the same thing would happen. So that's another big, perhaps unknown value of having a doula. Like they can just be there and clear in a way that you might not want to be when you're giving birth to those around you, medical teams and whatever.
So when we came to labor itself, how did that kick off for you?
Yeah, so my contractions started in the night and sort of woke. Well, no, they started like late evening, and I was able to go to sleep because I wasn't really sure that's what they were, like if they were proper contractions or not. So I kind of went to sleep and then they woke me up and I woke my husband up. Unfortunately, my son was sleeping because that had been one of my concerns, which is what I think a lot of people worry about with a second baby.
Was the start, how around your due date? Was it before or after?
No, after. It was, I think with my son, son was born like 40 weeks plus 5 days, and my daughter was 40 plus 1.
Okay.
So both after the due date. I don't even like using the word late because I just think it's just it's such a like finger in the air giving that date. So I always, like, for friends and whatever, I discourage people from like worrying too much about that because I know a lot of people can worry about that date. So yeah, a little bit after the due date for both of them. Yeah, the thing that was so different about the second labor to the first was that with my son, my first baby, it was very steady, like quite fast, but sort of things built up in a steady fashion, and then he was born. Whereas with my daughter, it was like really slow, really, really slow. And I was getting a bit nervous because, you know, I had some knowledge about birth and I was thinking, like, if things don't speed up a little bit, I don't want to have to leave the house. I've got this plan. I want to be at home. I want things to go the way they did the first time. And I think that's probably one of the hardest things. Like, it's going to go the way it's going to go and you can't change that. And I think I was sort of thinking in my head, like, I really need things to speed up. And of course, that's not going to help things speed up if you're in your head. It was slow, and then like crazy fast at the end. But I was able to have both of them born in the birthing pool, both born in the water. I think I got into the birth pool with my son sort of just before he was born. And so it was like quite a lot of relief when I got in the pool. Whereas my daughter, I was like, we've been going for ages, let me get in. And it'll speed up when I get in because that's what happened with my son. That's not what happened. It carried on being really slow. But yeah, that was the process, her process, my body doing what it was going to do with her, with, you know, different baby, different pregnancy.
Do you know how long your labor lasted?
They were both like roughly 8-9 hours. So they were both quite similar length, but just really different process. Yeah.
And was it really hard for you to really bring your focus to this current birth and not have this constant looking back and comparing, like this whole like, oh, how was it there? Do I remember this? Is this the same? Is this different? How difficult was it for you to really, I don't want to say shut the door to the other birth, but like kind of like leave like a little room open, but really shift your focus to what is happening here? How can I help myself in this situation? Or was that hard?
It was really hard. And I think because it was taking so long, it was even harder because it was like, I need to do that even more. I need to, you know, ideally get out of my head and into my body. And I'd done so much preparation with my son's birth to do that. I mean, I'm somebody that is always trying to meditate regularly and like struggling. And so when I was pregnant. It was also COVID. It was during COVID when I was pregnant with my son. So it was slower. Life was slower. So I think I found it easier to get into that headspace of, well, I was meditating and I was like preparing, like breathing. And so I think I was very fortunate that the process was pretty straightforward. And you know, like I said, it was like it progressed at a steady pace. It was relatively quick. And so I used all the tools that I'd been given through the various courses and people that supported me. And like I remembered things that I could hold on to with him during that process. And then he was born. Whereas with her, it was like really slow, really slow, really slow. Okay, get out of your head, you know, stay with it. Yeah, but, you know, your head's just kind of, it's not like it was before. And then because I had kind of learned so much, all of the possible things that might need to start happening, start creeping into your head, don't they? And that's what happened for me. So anyway, I was very lucky that I actually remember, like, I was shouted in the birth pool, like, come on, Florrie. My daughter's name's Florence and we call her Florrie. We sort of decided we'd probably be calling her Florrie before she was born. So I like shouted her name. And yeah, shortly after she was born.
She heard you.
She heard you.
She got there in the end. She was, just reminding me that she wasn't going to be guided by anyone. She was going to follow her own path.
So talking about the birth, how was it then in the active labor in itself? Like, how long did that take? Obviously you were in the pool then as well. Were you able to be part of it as well yourself? Like being able to take her out? Like everyone has their own different wishes on how they partake in it.
Yeah. Do you mean like when she was actually born?
Yep.
So with both my son and my daughter, we'd planned that my husband would lift them out, and he was able to do that. Yeah, for me, it was really just about, the main thing for me was just about staying with it and being as present as I could be, and ideally them being born naturally. Like I didn't have any other kind of, I want to do this or that. It was just, yeah. I mean, I didn't want to be spending my whole time being like, I just want to get through this. I want to get through this. But I think there is a level of that, a bit of a reality for a lot of people. So yeah, I feel really grateful. I feel really grateful for both of the births, but I do feel that Patricia, the doula, was a big part of why I was able to kind of stay with it and keep calm. You know, there was nothing, just because it wasn't going any faster than the first time didn't mean there was something wrong. And I think if she hadn't been there to keep reminding me of that, keep supporting me, then, and making me feel safe. That's the thing that she would say. It's just all about you feeling safe and looked after, and that you're okay. Just keep letting your body do what it's doing.
And was your son present during the whole process, or was he somewhere else?
Like, yeah, as I said, I'd been like really nervous about that one because I feel like on a spectrum, you know, I'm an advocate for home birth. I've had a doula. Like I also wondered if he could be present during the birth. And for a lot of people, they'd be like, oh my God, you know, like what? And this is partly Patricia's fault. The doula has 4 children. So she's given birth 4 times. All of her children, like throughout, you know, later children being born, were present. And I think for her, like it doesn't have to be terrifying and scary like it is in the movies. So she was like, you know, he can be there, and then and that it can be a part of him, you know, recognizing that his sister is here. Like really, because, you know, when they're little, you know, he was so little, like what does this really mean? Is there ever going to be a baby born? And so actually to be a part of that could be a real gift for them, was her point. I was like, kind of really want to be there with you on that, but I'm still not sure. So the fact that he was asleep when most of my labor was happening was really helpful for me. Although he was a good sleeper, I don't know why. He maybe could just sense there was something going on in the house, I suppose. But he did wake up like middle of the night. And so my partner just put Peppa Pig on, and he had like the biggest Peppa Pig marathon of his life. And he stayed awake. He didn't go back to sleep from like 3 a.m. or something, which I just can't get my head around. He was also he likes to have someone with him, like most children do at that age. Like he's little, but he just kind of powered through his Peppa Pig by himself. And my partner obviously kept going up to see him. And I think my partner was a little bit stressed about that. I was less aware because he was like, oh, I don't want to leave him on his own, but I can't, like, what's the best thing to do here? But he seemed fine. And so we just carried on with the Pepper plan, as opposed to a neighbor or something, which we also had as a backup. And Patricia also kept going up there, and she's like, he's fine, like just he's cool. And then when the final stage of labor, she asked me, do you want me to get Max? I was like, no, no, let's just get through this, and then he can meet his sister. And so then before I even got out of the birth pool, they called Max, and he came and met her and was a bit like, whoa, hi.
Did you find it strange you have a pool in your sitting room?
Well, we'd prepared him for that stuff.
Oh.
We'd prepared a lot of that. I mean, my midwife actually said, yeah, get the pool out early, like get him in it, like get him used to it. I was like, I don't know about that. But he knew what was going to be happening or what he was likely to see, or at least he'd been told it. Like, you don't never know quite how much they kind of fully understand, but he
did he ask for it to come out again by any chance? Like, can we get the crack out the pool, Mum?
Didn't, surprisingly enough. No, after seeing me in it, no, he didn't. But he did. He still talks about it now and again. Like, doesn't, not the details, but like it wasn't. There was no fear for him around it. It was like just pretty interesting and quite cool that like she'd come out in the water and that there she was, this little tiny thing.
And how was the first 24 hours then as a family of 4 and being home? And I guess the Kramsort then at one point came and the whole house was full of all these people.
So when I think about like those first moments, I think it's just mad. I mean, it's just nuts. Like there's nothing you can possibly compare it to. And I was again like so conscious of what Max might be thinking and feeling, and like, you know, obviously everybody's looking at this baby and what about him? And again, like a lot of that is me projecting and from my own experience being an older one, but it was pretty calm. And I'm just, again, like so grateful to the Dutch Kramzorg system, because I had met a Kramzorg during my first experience who I'd got on with super well. And I'd had a couple of Kramzorgs during the like week that we'd had help during my first experience. So one of the ladies had become a private Kramzorg or gone off on her own. And so I contacted her and said, like, second time, can you be the one with us the whole time? And she could. So that was awesome because I felt like I knew her a little bit. And again, like I had that safe, cared for feeling with her, knowing us a little bit. And first time and second time, I talked a lot to my Kramzorg, like about how I was feeling, not just how I was physically doing, which is, of course, part of what they're there for. But I think that's what's really important about ideally having a connection with the Kramzorg, because for me, she was just a close friend that was like listening to me cry a bit when, you know, Max and his daddy went out, and I was like, oh, you know, this is so hard. I want to go with them, but I can't because I'm it's the first week and your emotions are all over the place anyway. So yeah, just having that understanding and like just kindness and connection was like massive for me, especially because you're in another country, given that we're expats.
And how was it with Max then for that period when, you know, you really needed to relax, and then that churn of like, you want to be with Max and to, you know, to be able to do what you used to do, but now you really need to take care of yourself right now?
It's like totally heartbreaking. And I just don't think we talk about it enough. It's like brutal. And you do what you can, right? Like everybody's doing what they can, what they physically can do. Like if I think about moms who've had C-sections and there's even less they can do in those first weeks. Oh, it's just like, it's so hard. And so, you know, on the one hand, like, so Max was only 2 and a bit, but he, in those early weeks, like he spent so much time with my husband that actually their bond got, you know, much, much tighter. It was already, you know, they're super close anyway, but like it was really, the dad's just critical in that moment. Partner is just critical in that moment. They need them. And so that was good. And obviously that's also hard to see, right? Like you often as that like first parent, you're like the one that they need the most, and you feel like, oh, I'm not needed as much as I was. And that's like, it's just really hard. There's really positive things and really hard things all wrapped into one. I made a point of like having moments with him on my own, and I just kept that up, and I still try and do that. I think that for me, that's like one of the hardest things of having 2. Like I really want to be able to deeply connect with them both. And there is just a reality that like sometimes that's not possible. And it's really hard reality to accept. You've been able to just throw all this love on the first, and then you just cannot keep doing that.
So if we are going to look back then on your second birth, I mean, as you said, you've already been through the first, you've gone through quite a lot thinking about how am I going to do this? You know, it was an unexpected joy to have so quickly happen to you when many people struggle for a long time. Yeah. And then you've gone through the pregnancy and it's been quite an emotional toll on you. But when you look back on it, how do you see, like for anyone listening who's, you know, going to be having a baby and they have a 2-year-old maybe, like what learnings have you or insights do you have from that?
Just think you have to keep talking about what's going on for you, and just trying to be as real about it as you can. I think a lot of it feels quite hard to voice because, like you said, so many people struggle to have a second or to get pregnant. And I found that really, really difficult because there were people in my network, that were struggling either to have a first or a second. And I just, at some point, I found myself actually getting a bit frustrated because I was thinking, well, that's true for you, and I'm there for you, and I'm wanting to support you through what's going on for you. My experience isn't that, but it's still difficult. And I think we just have to try and be real about how hard some of these things can be, and that they can be super joyful and we can be super grateful as well. And like that gray is pretty nuts. And for a lot of people, very difficult. I know my partner is Mr. Black and White. And so like that gray was really difficult for him. But for me too, I mean, I actually am someone who like lives in gray. Yeah, it just is hard. And I think you have to voice it or else you carry it physically. I mean, I definitely carried a bit of it. And as a result, I found it harder to kind of recover, for my body to recover from pregnancy. I think it doesn't have to be difficult to recover second time if it wasn't difficult first time, or, it really depends on what's going on for you in your life as much as, like emotionally and as much as physically as to how you recover. So yeah, I would just, again, encourage people to just be as real as they can and talk and find that safety that I felt I had with the doula and then the Kramzorg and a group of really close friends.
I'm just going to ask this question, but feel free to not answer it. But speaking of talking about it and really going into depth, was there any point where you were scared that, so first of all, you had a little bit of a difficult start into the pregnancy, and then you had said that you had this struggle of, oh, what's with my firstborn and the love and all that. Was there any point where you were scared that you weren't capable of giving the same love, or like there was like some struggle for your daughter where you said, I feel so torn and I had a little bit of a difficult start with that, feeling the love for this child, which we all can have, and we all know it's a phenomenon that we have to create this bonding, and it's not immediate for everyone when a baby comes 100%. Out and you flooded with the love. It takes time sometimes. So did you struggle with that? And again, feel free to say this is too far.
No, I mean, I'm like, I totally agree with you. I think it is kind of mad that you can be always expected to just completely fall head over heels in love with this being, especially if I think you've had a difficult birth. Like sometimes I think that must make it so much more difficult. So I didn't struggle with that. Yeah, in some ways, now you're asking me the question, it's quite surprising that I didn't. I mean, I think I had like highs and lows in those early weeks. And honestly, like, I think I still do, right? Like, I just think it's just hard parenting two, and they're quite close together, and all of the things that I kind of want to do and get right and sometimes struggle to, and just have to kind of live with the reality of that. But no, I didn't feel at any point, I've never felt, was this the right decision? And so I'm really grateful for that, because yeah, legitimately I could have felt that, understandably, like especially when things got really hard, and also that I could have been projecting my own sort of experiences and like fear of like the second maybe dominating the first and taking love away from the first. Like I haven't actually felt any moment that I regretted anything or wished something hadn't been the way it was.
One last question would be, after having two, how long has it taken you to come back to finding yourself now?
That is an excellent question, because I don't think I'm there yet. And I don't know that I'll ever, this is talked about a lot, isn't it? Like how much you change when you have children. And I definitely recognized that with my first, and like recognize it again with the second. And I don't know whether that means like I've changed again. I think it does. And like I said before, I think a lot of that change has actually been really positive for me, because I've learned a lot really fast that I needed to learn about myself, my own experience and my own challenges, I think, emotionally. But yeah, I think it's a journey, cliche. And I recognize that I need that community, those people that made me feel safe during pregnancy and birth, to be there still now, so that I can still feel safe to, psychologically safe to say how I really feel, how real things are, both the good things and the hard things. It's still all worth it. It's still all worth it. I think I'm making some of this sound hard, but it's real, it's true, and it doesn't it doesn't take away from the joy of the children. And now that they're, so my daughter Florrie is nearly 15 months, my son's nearly 4, and they're like interacting with each other. They're like, just this last week, been like charging about on the bed, like bouncing about on the bed together. And it's just really gorgeous to see that. And then finally kind of doing something with each other, because for so long they don't and they can't, you know, and the first doesn't get anything really from the second, except for like this baby taking time away from mommy and daddy. So it's now happening, that part, which is lovely.
Well, thank you so much for sharing this. And thank you for your honesty and also encouragement. And hopefully this was helpful for anyone out there listening, maybe going through their first pregnancy and preparing for their first birth, but equally also for their second, third, or whatever number you're on. This is, I think, relevant to anyone, and someone can take something away from your story. So thank you again for coming on, being so honest and raw and open with us. And this is why we have this podcast, to really shed a light on the things that people don't talk too much about or are scared of admitting or even sharing with anyone but themselves. So that was, I hope, a good piece for anyone out there listening. And if you want to hear more stories like Helen's story or any other experts, we are coming out every Wednesday with an expert episode of this podcast. Every Monday, we have a Damn Chats episode. You can catch us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. We are also on Instagram, Damn Parenting Podcast. If you want to support us, share, like, and subscribe, rate us in all the apps. Bring us into the conversation, share the episodes, spread the links, spread the word, so we can keep this going and have amazing people like Helen come on and share their stories and other more to spread the word. This has been us, Damn Parenting, and we'll hear you on the next episode. Bye.
Bye.